Welcome, builders of the internet. My name is Jessa and I work in construction. It's infamous that construction projects tend to run really late, so I thought I would talk about why this is and some of the ways to reduce these delays. As always, you can find my sources in the description.
Is building on my mind.
Weather. The first cause of delay I'll talk about today is the weather or climate conditions. This impacts projects worldwide, particularly in regions such as Africa, the Middle East and South and East Asia, where they experience more extreme conditions. Of course, there are some predictable conditions, such as typical rainfall, snow, winds, etc., which would usually be taken into account before the works have started. But in spite of all the data collected about weather in previous years, this is still a factor of uncertainty. If there are parts of the site that are exposed or unprotected, they can be damaged by rain, which means that you may have to wait until they're dried in order to continue working on them, or you may have to even order new materials. Some equipment may be dangerous to operate in some types of weather, such as wind, which can slow down the overall productivity. When there are particularly adverse conditions, such as hurricanes or flooding, this can even stop construction completely. When construction stops and starts frequently over and over again, this also has a subtle difference on the progress. For example, when you're continuously working on one thing, it's much easier to get into the swing of things. But when you stop and start a lot, people tend to lose that rhythm as they have to recount where they left off. Some of the actions that can be done to reduce this type of delay is having a knowledge of the weather based on data from previous years, which can then be taken into consideration when planning the project. Speaking of planning, it is useful to also have procedures for employees to follow in case of adverse weather, so that everybody can react safely and effectively. It also helps to protect equipment and materials where possible, potentially moving them indoors and saving tasks that aren't dependent on weather for the days where the conditions are less than ideal. Organisation. The next cause is organisation, which encompasses planning, coordination, management, and communication. The vast majority of construction work is currently carried out on site, so it's important for all activities to be strategically planned so that work can happen smoothly and in the least disruptive way possible. The main reason for ineffective planning is allegedly due to unrealistic project schedules being set by the client, the person who's paying for the works, or where there are delays in construction activities as well. It's important for the person organising the programme to be familiar with their labourers' speed for completing various activities and tasks, as well as the amount of time that it could take for materials and equipment to be delivered to site after they've been ordered. If there's an order that needs to be made, say, 10 weeks in advance, this must be accounted for so that it can arrive on site on time for when it's needed. Conversely, you don't want to be ordering items too early, as it could be damaged by the weather or cause inconvenience to the people working on site. It's all good planning what happens on site, but without effective communication, this can result in resources being allocated less effectively and sometimes even detrimental misunderstandings, which cause impacts on the programme. One of the ways to limit organisational delays includes utilising platforms of communication and information technologies that everybody involved is trained in using. There are some great cloud technology platforms which provides a digital space to store relevant information, but at the end of the day, if people don't know how to utilise these platforms, they may end up having much more limited benefits. As well as this, it is useful to ensure that the site and project managers have adequate experience so that when they're planning the programme, it can be much more realistic, which leads on to the next cause of delay. Labour and experience. There are fears of construction labour shortages, and although there are many new technologies becoming available to help the industry, people are still a fundamental factor for projects to reach completion. In some countries, such as Qatar, UAE and Kuwait, there are shortages in the number of labourers available due to a large boom of construction projects taking place simultaneously. In some countries, construction labour shortage isn't necessarily the cause of project delays, but instead a lack of people with the specialised skills to do the work. There seems to be less appeal for working in the construction industry, particularly in the trades jobs. In the UK, for example, the construction workforce is ageing, with about a fifth of tradespeople being over 50, and as these workers retire, there aren't enough younger people entering into these professions in order to help with demand. In terms of experience, it can be problematic in developing countries, which tend to have a more limited number of institutions that can offer the adequate construction training, and as a result, it can be more common in these countries for people without formal training to do the work, which can understandably cause significant delays. Of course, it is so beneficial to have trained professionals to do the work, to ensure correct practices are being executed, and so others have more trust in what's going on, which can reduce the conflict too. I think it's important for young people in schools to be encouraged to work in the construction industry, and for it to be accepted as a more respectable option. Material and equipment shortage. Another factor for delays is when the desired materials and equipment aren't available. If there isn't much supply but there is high demand for the products, prices tend to increase, which has financial consequences on the project. As I mentioned before, there can be long lead-in times for materials to be manufactured and then delivered to the site. But there are other causes for material shortages too, including when the design specification has been changed. The prices may have been increased, materials could have been stolen or vandalised, or there could have been incompetence from the consultants. For the last one in particular, sometimes the project managers or engineers or surveyors may put down an incorrect figure which hasn't been checked, and this may not even be taking into account the amount of, say, wastage when you're cutting tiles and so on. In order to reduce material shortages, one of the solutions is to do the relevant checks needed to ensure that quantities have been measured correctly and the right amount can be ordered. It's also useful to consult somebody who is more experienced for advice of the amount that is typically wasted, in order to provide insight about maybe alternative ways to cut and install materials. In addition, it's also beneficial to make sure that there are sufficiently trained labourers in line to do the work, as wastage can be minimised and chances of delays are reduced. And finally, finance. Money is often a source of conflict in construction and can lead to delays. For example, when the client who wants the works to be done fails to pay on time as per the contract conditions. Late payments can affect the contractor with their orders, as well as further down the supply chain, for example with subcontractors and other people who may be dependent on the contractor's money. Once the payment has been made to the main contractor, this money needs to be managed effectively. First, the contractor needs to ensure that they have applied for enough money in the first place so that the difference between the money in and the money out isn't detrimental to the organisation. Once they've received the money, they need to manage this and ensure that the appropriate amounts go to the right people, at the right times as well, say for subcontractors and making orders. In order to reduce financial causes for delays, the client needs to ensure that they are making their payments on time so that the supply chain has the means to do the works. But it's also important to choose reliable contractors who have a stable financial background and, say, a good previous records for their projects, and looking at their financial papers, say on the government websites as well. It is also useful for the contractor to provide something called a cash flow forecast so that the client can see how and when the money is going to be distributed throughout the project. Thank you for watching this video. There are many other factors for delays in construction, but I thought I would talk about these 5, which are more significant reasons generally. A lot of the solutions discuss having qualified and experienced people to do the jobs, so I'd just like to reiterate that Construction is a great industry to be working in. If you're in school and not sure what career to choose, I would definitely consider this as a possibility. That's all I have to say about construction for now. I hope it helped build in your mind.
Thanks for watching this channel, it's building on my mind. Check out my other videos, but first hit the bell and comment, like, subscribe. Please, it really helps with the